Hello everyone, this is Julia. Thank you so much for joining me on my craft room adventures and welcome to another video. Today I have a spring themed slider card to share with you, and I'm using the super sweet Dandy Day stamp set by Lawn Fawn for this. I stamped out all of the images onto Neenah Solar White cardstock with Gina K Amalgam Ink, and I cut them out using my brother's Scan and Cut, and now I'm just using Copic Markers to color them in. For my mice, I'm using E50 markers, E53, E51, and E50. I'm just, as usual, laying down my darkest color, the E53, blending that out with the E51, a little bit with the E50, leaving the lightest colors, lightest areas white, and then on my second layer coloring everything in. I'm using a light touch of E50 on the belly and also leaving out the E53 for the little baby. And I'm only showing the coloring of one of the mice because I colored them all the same. The W00 that was there, I actually just shaded in the parts around the dandelions. And now for my greens, I'm using G17, G02, and G00. Just to color in the little stems, and I also used some yellows for the centers. I believe it was Y21 and Y11. Now doing my weird little blush trick again. I showed it first in my Easter card video. I believe it was the Easter Inside Shadow Box card, and I read on Facebook that somebody used blush to add the cheek highlights, and it's really working well for me. For my butterflies, I'm using YR02, YR00, and blending that out with a Y11 at the tips of the wings of the butterflies, just to give it a nice ombre effect. Sorry, I'm a tiny bit out of frame there, but you can just barely see it. I'm coloring both butterflies in exactly the same. I'm just not using the Y21 as is listed up top. Now, more dandelions to color. For the yellow parts, I'm using the Y21 as my darkest shade, then going in with Y11, and then blending that out with Y00. For this, I'm not doing 2 layers because the areas are so small that you can barely tell. Now just going over with the Y00. Again, just giving them a little bit of a hazy look with the W00. And I will also be adding something so they don't stay this plain. Again with the G17, G02, and G00 for all of my green elements. I'm just going around with the one pen that I have, or the one marker that I have in my hand, which is in this case the G17, laying it down on all of my images because this is just way faster for me. Now the G02, blending that out just a little bit further than I did before. And lastly the G00. I really like these types of greens because for my scene I will be using cracked pistachio to ink blend, and those really work well together. Now I wanted to add some sparkle to my dandelions, so I'm using some white Wow clear glitter embossing powder, and I just used the Versamarker to add embossing ink around the dandelions, and then I'm just coating them with the glitter embossing powder. If you've never used glitter embossing powder, I do heat it from behind because I find that works better. Now I wanted to have like sets of 2 of these little flowers, but I wanted them facing not all the same way, So I just did a little die cut surgery. I snipped off the heads of the flowers and glued them on the back, or on the end part, and that way you really can't tell. I mean, if you look closely, you'll of course see that there's a cut there, but I think it works. Just gluing those two together so that they make like a nice pair, and then gluing the leaves to them. Now for the sliding part. I really wanted my little mouse to be able to slide around that's flying on the dandelion. I already adhered the top row of beads. I'm just using like tube-shaped beads, like seed beads that are about 2 millimeters, I believe, 2 or 3. And I just use a ruler to make sure that they're all in one straight line so that they can slide along the string later. Just make sure that they're as parallel as you can get it. A little bit really doesn't matter that much because they do have some wiggle room, but just try and get it as straight as you can, and leave those off to dry for a while because you want them to be nice and set before you move on. Now for the ink blending, I'm using an A2 sized panel and just ink blending some Tumbled glass and Salty Ocean on this. And I also die cut a panel with the puffy cloud borders to ink blend that. I die cut the Meadow backdrop in the portrait version out of Bristol smooth cardstock, and I'm ink blending cracked pistachio and evergreen bough onto it. I also ink blended a little bit of the Tumbled glass and Salty Ocean on the top, but I decided that I was going to add a frame on top, so I didn't show the ink blending of that because it won't be in the finished card. I just added some post-it notes in between so that I can ink blend every hill separately, which makes it a little bit easier, and this way I also didn't have to be careful to go over the blue in the frame because it would be covered anyway. I also die cut another Meadow backdrop just out of white cardstock to layer behind this one just to give it a little more stability, because I will be adding quite a bit of foam tape behind it, just so, you know, the card is still stable at the end. Now, moving it to the other side, putting the post-it note tape there, and ink blending the second hill, first with a cracked pistachio, and then giving it a little bit more definition with the evergreen bough. I'm also taking a tiny bit of pine needles, just for a little bit more dimension at the top of the hill. Then I'm wiping off my brush to blend it out, just so that the entire panel doesn't get too dark. And now I'm just going over the edges to make sure that there are no harsh lines from the post-it tape, and that it's all nice and smooth. I added all 3 ink pads, just put them directly on my mat, added some water, and I'm adding a few little splatters just for some added interest. Now I wanted to add some dandelions. I'm using Versafine Clair ink in the color Morning Mist, which is a medium toned gray. And the Versafine Clair inks are actually, you can emboss them. So I also added the Wow glitter, clear glitter embossing powder onto them, just to give them a really nice and sparkly look. I didn't want to stamp them in black because I figured in the sky that would be a little too harsh. I'm just doing it in layers because the ink doesn't stay as wet as long as, for example, the Versamark would. But you do have enough time to stamp this kind of a background, just add the powder in between. And then again, I'm heating from behind so that I don't lose any of the glitter. And once it's mostly melted, I'll just run it over the front. I also wanted to add a few more just with the backdrop in place, and I also wanted to add a few to the hills, just so that it all matches nicely. just stamped the exact same way as the background with the Morning Mist from Versafine Clair, and heat embossed with a glitter embossing powder. I die cut one of the wavy banners, or simple wavy banners, I believe, from Lawn Fawn, and just stamped the sentiment "Have a Dandy Day." And now I'm layering the second Meadow backdrop on the first. I'm just making sure that it lines up perfectly, that all the hilts, that I can still move both of the hilts apart from each other. Just making sure that they don't snag later if I do decide to maybe add something behind. I am adding the cloud border just to the top, and I wanted to have it a little bit higher so that my image has a bit more room to move. I cut off any of the excess, and I also die cut a stitched white frame from the stitched rectangle frame stackables, I believe, from Lawn Fawn, and just layered that on top. I added one layer of the shaker foam tape on the back, and I'm just making sure that it's all covered well. And now it's time to get my little mouse to slide. I'm using some nylon string, or nylon thread. The thinnest I could find I just have on hand, because those will be the most invisible on your card. And I'm just stringing it through each side of the beads. As you can see in a minute, I will be adding a little bit of tape at the end. Just some clear cello tape. You can use post-it tape, whatever you have on hand. Because I can't even tell you how many times I was trying to move it, adhere it to something, and suddenly the thread was out of the bead again. And I didn't want to have to restring it, so I just add some tape to both ends so that it's nice and in place and won't go anywhere until I'm ready to use it. Just to the ends, and then you'll snip them off anyway and you can just toss them. Alright, now my little mouse is ready to slide. Just looking at the placement, making some pencil marks where I want the mouse to slide to and from. I'm removing the parts of the backing paper of my foam tape. And I'm just taking the strings and pressing them into the exposed adhesive, making sure that the strings are as parallel as you can get them, or as I can get them, and pulling them tight to make sure that the slider mechanism works, and also trying the mechanism before you adhere anything. Then I'm removing the rest of the release paper, and I'm adding a second layer of the shaker foam on top. These kinds of sliders are really very easy to make because you basically just press the string into the adhesive and you're done. Now I'm just adding foam all around the panel, just a second layer, all the while making sure that the mechanism still works, snipping off the ends that are sticking out. To make sure that the little mouse doesn't snag on anything, I'm adding some powder tulle to the exposed sides of the foam tape and also to the backs of the cardstock, just to make sure it all runs smoothly. Now I added my background to a card base and added that to the exposed foam tape, and there goes our little mouse. Now it's just time to add the last elements, or the rest of the elements, to my scene. I'm adding one of the little dandelions to the little baby holding it, and the big one to the mouse that's blowing on the dandelion. And now I added foam tape off camera to all of the elements, and I'm just placing them down. I usually just remove the release paper and just lay it down slightly so that if I need to, I can still move it without ripping apart my card, because I tend to move things, as you'll see me do here in a minute. Just removing the backings of the foam tape. I decided that I do need to add the flowers first before I can place my Little mama mouse. Here we go, moving him. I don't think it's the last time I will be doing that. Adding my banner, just so that I can get the right placement for the mama with the little one. Adding another one, and here he goes again, just sliding him up a bit. And that finishes off my card for today. You can see the pretty sparkle of the glitter embossing powder on the dandelions in the background and on the big ones and the small ones, and there he goes, just sliding back and forth. I think it's really, really cute, and it's just a fun interactive element to add to a card. I really hope you enjoyed this one, that you're all staying safe and healthy. Thank you so much for watching. On screen I will link to 2 more videos that may interest you. Have a wonderful day. Bye!